Chapter 7 The Sorting Hat. The door swung open at once. A tall, black-haired witch in an emerald green robe stood there. She had a very stern face, and Harry's first thought was that this was not someone to cross. "The first years, Professor McGonagall," said Hagrid. "Thank you, Hagrid. I'll take them from here." What's up, Gabriella? How are you? Thank you for the heart, me, Cassidy. Thank you for the Go Popular. She pulled the door wide open. The entrance hall was so big you could have fit the whole of the Dursleys' house in it. The stone walls were lit with flaming torches like the ones at Gringotts. The ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase facing them led up the stairs. Hey, thank you, Cassidy. Thank you for joining. Are you going to bed, I assume? I'm good, thank you. I'm just reading right now, so if I don't see your messages, it's because I'm reading this chapter. They followed Professor McGonagall across the flagged stone floor. Harry could hear the drone of hundreds of voices from a doorway to the right. Whoa, that's crazy. I do. Howdy. I'm just reading, right? So, thank you. The rest of the school must have already been here, but Professor McGonagall showed the first years into a small empty chamber of the hall. Sup, Eliza? How we going? Howdy, Melanie. Standing rather close. Just letting you know, Melanie, there's a bunch of the regular viewers who are over in the Twitch chat right now. They crowded in, standing rather close together than they would have usually been, peering about nervously. "Welcome to Hogwarts," said Professor McGonagall. "The start of the term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony, because while you are here..." It is early tonight, because I gotta go, unfortunately. You'll have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend free time in the common room. The sorting hat is very important, because while you're here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. It does, doesn't it, Sosa? The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you're at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule breaking will lose your house points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honor. I hope each of you will be a credit to whichever house becomes winners. Horizon. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten up as much as you can while you're waiting. Her eyes lingered for a moment on Neville's cloak, which was fastened under his left ear, and on Ron's smudged nose. Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair. "I shall return when we are ready for you," said Professor McGonagall. "Please wait quietly." "I shall return when they're ready for you. Please wait quietly." She left the chamber. Harry swallowed. "How exactly do they sort us into houses?" he asked Ron. "Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking." Harry gave a horrible jolt. A test? In front of the whole school? But he didn't know anything about magic yet. What on earth would he have to do? He hadn't expected something like this the moment they arrived. He looked around anxiously and saw that everyone else looked terrified too. No one was talking much except for Hermione Granger, who was whispering very fast about all the spells she'd learnt and wondering which ones she'd need. Harry tried not to listen to her. He'd never been more nervous. Never. Not even when he'd had to take a school report home to the Dursleys saying that he'd somehow turned his teacher's wig blue. He kept his eyes fixed on the door. Any second now, Professor McGonagall would come back and lead him to his room. Then, something happened which made him jump a foot in the air. Several people behind him screamed. "What the?" he gasped. So did the people around him. About 20 ghosts had just streamed through the back wall, Pearly white and slightly transparent, they glided across the room, talking to each other and hardly glancing at the first years. They seemed to be arguing. What looked like a little fat monk was saying, "Forgive and forget. I say we ought to give him a second chance." "My dear friar, have we given Peeves all the chances he deserves? He gives us all a bad name, and you know he's not really even a ghost. I say, what are you all doing here?" A ghost wearing a rough and tights had suddenly noticed the first years. Nobody answered. "New students," said the fat friar, smiling around at them. "About to be sorted, I suppose." A few people nodded mutely. "Hope to see you in Hufflepuff," said the friar. "My old house, you know." "Move along now," said a sharp voice. "The sorting ceremony is about to start." Professor McGonagall had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall. "Now, form a line," Professor McGonagall told the first years, "and follow me." "I think so, Cat." Now, feeling oddly as though his legs had turned to lead, Harry got into line behind a boy with sandy hair, with Ron behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the Great Hall. Harry had never even imagined such a strange and splendid place. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles which were floating in the air over the long tables where the rest of the students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering gold plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up here so that they came to a halt in front of a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight. Dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts shone misty silver. Mainly to avoid all the staring eyes, Harry looked upwards and saw a velvety ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched, to look like the sky outside. I read it in Hogwarts, a history." It was hard to believe there was a ceiling there at all, and that the Great Hall didn't simply open up into the heavens. Harry quickly looked down again at Professor McGonagall, silently placed a four-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard hat. This hat was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have let it into the house. Maybe they had to try and get a rabbit out of it, Harry thought wildly. That seemed the sort of thing. Noticing that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat, he stared at it too. For a few seconds there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened like a wide mouth, and the hat began to sing. "Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find me a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hat sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see, so try on and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave of heart. Their daring, nerve, and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none, for I am the thinking cap." The whole hall burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed to each of the four tables and then became quite still again. "So, we've just got to try on the hat," Ron whispered to Harry. "I'll kill Fred. He was going on about wrestling a troll." Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on the hat was a lot better than having to do a spell, but he did wish they could have tried it on without everyone watching. The hat seemed to be asking rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted or any of it at the moment. If only the hat had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy. That would have been one for him. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward holding a long roll of parchment. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit in the stool to be sorted. She said, Abbot Hannah. A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of the line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause. Hufflepuff! Shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went down to sit at the Hufflepuff table. Harry saw the ghost of the fat friar waved merrily at her. Bones, Susan. Hufflepuff! Shouted the hat again, and Susan scuttled off to sit next to Hannah. Boot, Terry. Ravenclaw. The second table from the left clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up, shake the hands with Terry as he joined them. Brocklehurst Mandy went to the Ravenclaw too, but Brown Lavender became the first new Gryffindor, and the table on the left exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron's twin brother's catcalling. Bulstrode Millicent then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination. After all he'd heard about Slytherin, he thought they'd looked an unpleasant lot. He was starting to feel definitely sick now. He remembered being picked for teams during sports at his old school. He had always been last to be chosen, not because he was no good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him. Finch, Fletchley, Justin. Hufflepuff! Sometimes Harry noticed that the hat shouted out the house at once, but other times it took a little while to decide. Finnegan Seamus, the sandy-haired boy next to Harry, next in line, sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before the hat declared him a Gryffindor. Granger, Hermione. Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed on the hat eagerly on her head. Gryffindor! Shouted the hat. Ron groaned. I'm glad you are. A horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do when you're really nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there with the hat over his eyes for ages until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said there had obviously been a mistake and he better go back onto the train? When Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, was called, he fell over on his way to the stool. The hat took a long time to decide with Neville. When it finally shouted, Gryffindor! Neville ran off still wearing it and had to jog back amid gales of laughter to put it back on McGall's morag. Malfoy swaggered forward with his name was called and got his wish at once. The hat barely even touched his head when it screamed, Slytherin! Malfoy went to join his friends Crabbe and Goyle, looking quite pleased with himself. There weren't many people left now. Moon, Knott, Parkinson, then a pair of twin girls, Pattle and Pattle, then Perks, Sally Ann, and then, at last, Potter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out, like little hissing fires all over the hall. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter. The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a look at him. Next second, he was looking at the black inside of the hat. He waited. Hey, thank you for the roses, Betty. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent. Oh my goodness, yes. And a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edge of the stool and thought, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. Not Slytherin, eh? Said the small voice. Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness. No doubt about that. No? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor! Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily towards the Gryffindor table. He was so relieved to have been chosen and not put in Slytherin. He hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheers. Percy the prefect got up and shook his hand vigorously, while Weasley twins yelled, We got Potter! We got Potter! Harry Potter sat down opposite the ghost in the rough he'd seen earlier. The ghost patted his arm, giving Harry the sudden horrible feeling he just plunged into a bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table properly now. At the end nearest him sat Hagrid, who caught his eye and gave him the thumbs up. Harry grinned back, and there, in the centre of the high table, in a large gold chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry recognised him at once from the card he'd got out of the chocolate frogs on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair was the only thing in the hall that shone as brightly as the ghost's. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell too, the nervous young man from the Leaky Cauldron. He was looking very peculiar in a large purple turban. And now there were only 3 people left to be sorted. Turpin Lisa became a Ravenclaw, and then Ron's turn. He was pale green by now. Harry crossed his fingers under the table, and a second later the hat shouted, "Gryffindor!" Harry clapped loudly with the rest as Ron collapsed into the chair next to him. "Well done, Ron. Excellent," said Percy pompously. Across Harry and Zabini Blaze was... What? Oh, across Harry as Zabini Blaze was made a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Harry looked down at his empty gold plate. He had only just realised how hungry he was. The pumpkin pastry seemed ages ago. Albus Dumbledore had got to his feet. He was beaming at the students, his arms wide open, as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all here. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are. Nitwit, Blubber, Oddment, Tweak. Thank you." He sat back down. Everybody clapped and cheered. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. "Is he a bit mad?" he asked Percy uncertainly. "Mad?" said Percy airily. "He's a genius. Best wizard in the world. But he is a bit mad, yes. Potatoes, Harry?" Harry's mouth fell open. The dishes in front of him were now piled with food. He had never seen so many things he liked to eat on one table. Roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops and lamb chops, sausages, bacon and steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, chips, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrot, gravy, ketchup, and for some reason, mint hambugs. The Dursleys had never exactly starved Harry, but he'd never been allowed to eat as much as he liked. Dudley had always been taking anything that Harry really wanted, even if it made him sick. Harry piled his plate with a bit of everything, except the humbugs, and began to eat. It was all delicious. "That does sound good," said the ghost in the ruffs sadly, watching Harry cut his steak. "Can't you?" "I haven't eaten in nearly 500 years, said the ghost. "I don't need to, of course, but one does miss it. I don't think I've introduced myself. Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington at your service, resident ghost of Gryffindor Tower." "I know who you are," said Ron suddenly. "My brothers told me about you. You're Nearly Headless Nick." "I would prefer you to call me Sir Nicholas de Mimsy," the ghost began stiffly, but sandy-haired Seamus Finnegan interrupted. "Nearly headless? How can you be nearly headless?" Sir Nicholas looked extremely miffed, as if their little chat wasn't going at all the way he wanted. "Like this," he said irritably. He seized his left ear, and pulled his whole head, swung off his neck and onto his shoulder as if it was on a hinge. Someone had obviously tried to behead him, but not done it properly. Looking pleased at the stunned faces, Nearly Headless Nick flipped his head back onto his neck, coughed, and said, "So, new Gryffindors. I hope you're going to help us win the house championship this year. Gryffindor has never gone so long without winning. Slytherin has gotten the last 6 cups in a row. The bloody Baron's becoming almost unbearable. He's Slytherin's ghost." Harry looked over at Slytherin's table and saw a horrible ghost sitting there, with blank staring eyes, a gaunt face, and robes stained with silver blood. He was right next to Malfoy, who, Harry was pleased to see, didn't look too pleased with the seating arrangements. "How did he get covered in blood?" asked Seamus with great interest. "I've never asked," said Nearly Headless Nick delicately. When everyone had eaten as much as they could, the remains of the food on the plates faded away, leaving them sparkling clean as before. A moment later, the puddings appeared, blocks of ice cream in every flavour you could think of. Apple pies, treacle tarts, chocolate eclairs, and jam donuts, trifles, strawberries, jelly, rice pudding. As Harry helped himself to a treacle tart, the talk turned to families. "I'm half and half," said Seamus. "Me dad's a muggle." Mams didn't tell him she was a witch till they were married. Bit of a nasty shock for him. The others laughed. What about you, Neville? Said Ron. Well, my gran brought me up and she's a witch, said Neville, but the family thought I was a muggle for ages. Great Uncle Algie kept trying to catch me off guard and force some magic out of me. He pushed me off the end of a Blackpool pier once. I nearly drowned. But nothing happened until I was 8. Great Uncle Algie came around for tea and he was hanging me out the upstairs window by my ankles when my great auntie Enid offered him a meringue and he accidentally let go. But I bounced all the way down the garden onto the road. They were all really pleased. Gran was crying, she was so happy. And you should have seen their faces when I got here. They thought I might not be magic enough to come, you see. Great Uncle Algie was so pleased he brought me my toad. On Harry's other side, Percy Weasley and Hermione were talking about lessons. I do hope they start right away. There's so much to learn. I'm particularly interested in transfiguration, you know. Turning something into something else, of course. It's difficult. It's supposed to be very difficult. You'll be starting small, just matches into needles and that sort of thing. Harry, who was starting to feel warm and sleepy, looked up at the high table. Hagrid was drinking deeply from his goblet. Professor McGonagall was talking to Professor Dumbledore. Professor Quirrell, in his absurd turban, was talking to a teacher with greasy black hair, a hooked nose, and sallow skin. It happened very suddenly. The hooked-nosed teacher looked past Quirrell's turban straight into Harry's eyes, and a sharp, hot pain shot across the scar on Harry's forehead. Ouch! Harry clapped a hand to his head. What is it? Asked Percy. Nothing. The pain had gone as quickly as it come. Harder to shake off was the feeling Harry got from the teacher's look, a feeling that he didn't like at all. Who's that teacher talking to Professor Quirrell? He asked Percy. Oh, you know Quirrell. You know Quirrell already, do you? No wonder he's looking so nervous. That's Professor Snape. He teaches potions, but he doesn't want to. Everyone knows he's after Quirrell's job. Knows an awful lot about dark arts, Snape. Harry watched Snape for a while, but Snape didn't look at him again. At last, the pudding too disappeared, and Professor Dumbledore got to his feet. The hall fell silent. Again. Ahem. Just a few more words now. We are all fed and watered. I have a few start of term notices to give you. First years should note that the forest in the grounds is forbidden to all pupils, and a few of our older students would do well to remember this as well. Dumbledore's twinkling eyes flashed in the direction of the Weasleys. I have also been asked by Mr. Finch, the caretaker, to remind you that no magic should be used between classes in the corridors. The Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of term. Anyone interested in playing in those for their house should contact Madam Hooch. And finally, I must tell you that this year, the third floor corridor on the right hand is out of bounds to everybody who does not wish to die a very painful death. Harry laughed, but he was one of the few who did. He's not serious, he muttered to Percy. Must be, said Percy, frowning at Dumbledore. It's odd, because he usually gives a reason why we're not allowed to go somewhere. The forest full of dangerous magical beasts, everyone knows that. I do think he might have told us prefects at least. And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the school song, cried Dumbledore. Harry noticed the other teachers' smiles had become rather fixed. Dumbledore gave his wand a little flick as if he was trying to get a fly off the end of the golden ribbon and a golden ribbon flew out of it, which rose high above the tables and twisted itself snake-like into words. Everyone picked their favourite tune, said Dumbledore, and off we go. Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hoggywart, Hogwarts. Teach us something, please, whether we be old and bald or young with scabby knees. Our heads could do with filling with some interesting stuff, for now they're bare and full of air, dead flies and a bit of fluff. So teach us things worth knowing, bring back what we've forgot. Just do your best, we'll do the rest, and learn until our brains rot. Everyone finished the song at different times. At last, only the Weasley twins were left singing to a very slow funeral march. Dumbledore conducted their last few lines with his wand, and when they had finished, he was one of those who clapped the loudest. Ah, music, he said, wiping his eyes. A magic beyond all we do here. And now, bedtime. Off you trot. The Gryffindor's first years followed Percy through the chattering crowds out of the great hall and up the marble staircase. Harry's legs were like lead, but only because he was so tired and full of food. He was too sleepy even to be surprised that the people in the porches among the corridors whispered and pointed as they passed, or that twice Percy led them through doorways with hidden behind sliding panels and hanging tapestries. They climbed more staircases, yawning and dragging their feet, and Harry was wondering how much further they had to go when they came to a sudden halt. A bundle of walking sticks was floating in mid-air ahead of them, and as Percy took a step forward, they began throwing themselves at him. "Peeves," Percy whispered to the first year. "A poltergeist," he raised his voice. "Peeves, show yourself." A loud, rude sound, like the air being let out of a balloon, answered, "Do you want me to go to the bloody Baron?" There was a pop, and a little man with a wicked grin, wicked dark eyes, and a wide mouth appeared, floating cross-legged in the air, clutching the walking stick. "Oh," he said with an evil cackle. "Ickle thirsties. What fun." He swooped suddenly at them. They all ducked. "Go away, Peeves, or the Baron will hear about this. I mean it," barked Percy. Peeves stuck out his tongue and vanished, dropping the walking stick on Neville's head. They heard him zooming away, rattling coats and armor as he passed. "You want to watch out for Peeves," said Percy as they set off again. "The Baron's the only one who can control him. He doesn't listen to us prefects." Here we are. At the very end of the corridor hung a portrait of a very fat woman in pink silk dress. "Password?" she says. "Caput Draconis." "Draconis," said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. They all scrambled through it. Neville needed a leg up, and found themselves in the Gryffindor common room, a cozy round room full of squashy armchairs. Percy directed the girls through one door to their dormitories and the boys through the other. At the top of the spiral staircase, they were obviously in one of the towers. They found their beds at last. 5 four-poster beds hung with deep red velvet curtains. Their trunks had suddenly already been brought up. Too tired to talk much, they pulled on their pajamas and fell into bed. "Great food, isn't it?" Ron muttered to Harry, through the hangings. "Get off, Scabbers, he's chewing my sheets." Harry was going to ask Ron if they'd had any treacle tart, but he was asleep almost at once. Perhaps Harry had eaten a bit too much, because he had a very strange dream. He was wearing Professor Quirrell's turban, which was talking to him, telling him he must transfer to Slytherin at once, because it was his destiny. Harry told the turban he didn't want to be a Slytherin. It got heavier and heavier. He tried to pull it off, but it tightened painfully, and there was Malfoy, laughing at him as he struggled with it. Then Malfoy turned into the hook-nosed teacher Snape, whose laugh became high and cold. There was a burst of green light, and Harry woke, sweating and shaking. He rolled over and fell asleep again. And when he woke the next day, he didn't remember the dream at all.